I mostly studied watercolors, but this is an oil sketch. It is another example of a landscape where initially we had no idea where it was located except in Normandy. We only learned that it was near Domfront after doing this research. And the key to identifying that location are buildings that are pictured on top of a hill in the distance across a valley from where Corot was standing. Buildings that are unique to this location, though they could have easily been overlooked. This case study is an oil sketch by Corot titled La Cour de Maison de Peasant Normandy, the courtyard of a peasant's house in Normandy, dated 1830 to 1835. As you'll see, both its title and its date were changed as a result of this research. And again, we had no idea where the location is, other than in Normandy. But Normandy is a fairly large region in France, outlined in red here. It'd be very impractical to scan all of Normandy with Google Earth Studio to try to find a location that looks similar to what we see in that oil sketch. So I had to come up with another strategy. Another one could have been to see where Corot was in Normandy between 1830 and 1835, and he was in many different places, but if we had done that, we might not have found this location, and you'll see why a little later. So the other strategy was to describe what I see, as I'd done before. So I see, I think, a woman standing below Corot. Corot seems to be standing above her, perhaps like he's on a hill. Beyond her is a valley and a hill beyond that. And on top of that hill are some structures. Now, hills and valleys in Normandy are not uncommon, so they are not unique to this location. However, the structures on the hill might be. We see what appears to be two structures. The very large structure on the right, if you look at it carefully, appears to be a small village that is surrounded by a wall with towers. But I had no idea what that tall structure is to the left. It's not a tree, but I figured it must be important, otherwise why would Corot have included it in the oil sketch? So I began to think what it could be, and I thought, well, maybe it's the ruins of a castle. So I got online and I checked out hilltop villages in Normandy with ruins, and this came up, the hilltop village of Domfront. The ruins is of an old castle called the Chateau de Domfront, which sits right next to the village that is surrounded by a wall with towers. What we're looking at across the valley is the village of Domfront. Now, Domfront is in the southwest part of Normandy. Corot was there, but according to the catalog information and one oil painting we were able to find, he was there in the 1850s. There's no indication he was there in the 1830s. So Dina Woodall took the information we had to the director of the museum, Gary Tintereau, and Gary suggested that we change the name and date. And so we did. Using Google Earth Studio, I'm going to now take you past the ruins and across the valley to the hill where Corot was standing. At this location, Google Earth is flat, which means there are no buildings or vegetation that sticks up above the ground. It's all plastered flat on the surface of this case of the hill. But you will see the ruins because I'm going to point it out to you. And there it is. We're going to spin around and we're going to go across the valley to the hill on the opposite side of the valley where Corot was standing. And I'm going to stop it right here. That arrow on the left is pointing to the Chateau de Domfront, the ruins. And the second arrow points to the village. And I want you to notice that the separation between those two arrows is similar in both of these images. That was intentional. If I had stopped the video further down the hill, in other words, if I thought Corot had been further down the hill, the separation would have been greater because we would have been looking at the village from a different angle. If I had gone further up the hill, the separation would have been less. I stopped it where I did because the separations in both of these images are similar. And there's another clue, though it is a very subtle clue, that we are in the correct location. Look at the hill on the image on the right, where the village is, and look to its very left, you'll see a hill that is in the background. I'm going to separate these two hills with a white line. Now look at the oil sketch. And in this exact same location, you'll see a slight change in the shade of brown. which I will again separate with a white line. I find it interesting and maybe even instructive that very subtle landscape features, like a slight change in the shade of brown or a very tall structure on the opposite hill, are keys to identifying the landscape location. They are unique to the location, as is the observatory on the cliff in the watercolor by John Sell Cotman, and the unique characteristics of the cavern interior in the watercolor by William Day.